this episode, we're going to address a simple fault in the front of the suspension, which is lack of it. What we have here is a standard DR650 SE front spring out of the front fork. So filming this part, I've already put the actual valving and the internal, slide, whatever you want to call it, into the fork. Now, I've had to pull this fork back down because I lost the last part of the filming. So I've actually pulled this out of the bike again, pulled it down. This is the 4th time out of the bike now, so bear with me. What I did initially is I put this spring kit into it and I tested it just with changing the weight of the oil with the standard valving in there. I went to a 15 weight. It's a fair bit thicker than the 5 weight that these come with. But with the stiffer spring, the progressive spring out of the DR650, and the other fork doesn't get touched because the other fork just has the standard 0.72, I think by memory, in that one. So adding the 0.72 and the 0.42 together, that gives us our overall spring rate for the front of this bike. With this one, you're going to need a few things, and I'll touch on that a little bit more when I do the valving side. But basically, the first part of this is, if you want to do this as cheap as possible, get yourself a standard DR650 spring. Now these, from 1996 all the way to current DR650, just go to a suspension place, they throw these things out all the time. Second thing we need to do is we need to get a 38mm aluminium tube, and I'll put a picture of the one that I ordered for this. And thirdly, we need the 2 standard spring washers out of the DR650 spring. So these are between the actual caps. So you need 2 of these. And this I got, it's just a standard suspension washer off an automotive suspension washer. So it's got an 8mm inside and 38mm outside, and that's our retainer for the actual spring. And then you have the top nut. What I've actually done is, my first testing was the spring, this tube, and the washers with the 15 weight in here. It was under $40 for me to do that because I already had this spring. If you have to buy these springs, I don't expect you need to pay much for these, so it's quite a cheap modification. With doing that, it was quite good, but there was more that I wanted out of the suspension, so I ordered the Racetech Gold Valve kit, and I've installed that. So it's 500 mils of oil with this, because you put this spring in. Usually this fork takes 600 mils. This spring takes up obviously volume, so that goes down to 500 mils. So once this fork comes apart, you put it all back together, the bottom nut, all that, or the bottom bolt, do whatever valving you want to do, whether you leave this standard or you take this apart and put the Racetech in it. You pour your oil in the top, just the whole 500 mils, and you run through your dampening on the actual rod there. So you actually purge out all the air in it. It might take a little while, mine took about a minute to do that. Once you got that part done, you drop your spring in. Then there's a washer that goes in. I've already got the spring and the washer in here. So now we will put the rest of the stuff that we need in. Got the dampening tube and dampening rod. We've got them all separated. Very easy to do. If you're competent in doing suspension, it's very straightforward. So we've got the valve stack separated. So we've got the compression and the rebound. We have the Racetech bits and pieces here. Now this is where you got to sort of start to put everything together. Just refer to the Racetech guide to do this. When you get your Racetech kit, you get a number, you punch it in, you put all your specs in there, and then they give exactly what shims to use and everything else. So it's straightforward, and once you do that, we'll get to the next step. Okay, all the gold valves are all fitted. You got your compression stack and rebound all done. Now you get these instructions when you put all your codes and everything in. So go through the instructions, get all the diagrams when you actually put it together. Just take your time with it. It's a lot easier than what it actually looks. It's pretty straightforward. So just take your time and it's all good. I'm going to go and assemble these back into the dampening rod now and get this fork back together. Now with this part, we've now bled the rod and all the valving. So we've bled all the actual air that's in that system. So you've got a nice constant feel on the rod there. We already have the spring in here. We have a washer in here. So now we're ready for the tube. Now this tube is, like I said, 38 mils by 36 mil on the inside. I put a 8mm hole. It's about 55 mil from the top. So that is to help out with the actual installation. So what we want to do now to get this on is you want to get your nut that we removed off earlier. Wind that all the way down. What I do is I get a long zip tie, put it on around the collar like so. You're going to want to have a screwdriver to fit through the hole on the tube because we use that to hold the rod. And what we want to do is slide that down like so, like that, and that drops into there. So this aluminium tube is 330 millimeters long. So overall length is 330. And what we want to do is we want to push that down and use the hole we have here to slide it and lock the rod over and push it through. So now we've got that and that. We can now use that to lever down and we can use it to lock the rod out to the side. So we'll hold it like so. We can unscrew the nut, holding it down. It's under a bit of preload. There's about 35 to 40 mil of preload on that spring. This preload can be adjusted slightly if you just be careful not to call your spring out. This can come off, like so. So now we want to add the other washer and the last washer, which is the 8mm by 38. So wind that together like so. So you'll wind that all the way down. Then you can let the pressure off. It's not too bad when you do it. So now we've got all that on. All the springs intact. So we got our spring inside, we got the washer, we have the 330mm tube, another top washer, and then the last 8mm retainer washer. And this is the last part where you got your cap. The cap can go down like so. And then it's a 14mm and a 17mm to wind these back up. Just push it down slightly, get your spinner in there. And block these up. Just nice and snug. You take that back out, spinners back out, line your tube up, and if you've done it properly, we all should be back in 30mm top. So that's your spring all done. That's your shock, valving. If you want to go the cheap mod, it's just the spring with the 15 weight oil. If you want to go something a little bit more responsive, something tailored to yourself, then I suggest going the Racetech Gold valves. They suit me really well. So this is advisable up to about 85 kilos with the suspension set up this way. If you are heavier, you might want to go to a upgraded spring, but it depends how hard it's ridden. And now the left fork, which was dampening only, now has dampening and spring. So that's it. Hope you liked it. If you want to see more vids like this, click subscribe and like video. Thank you.